Now, it would be an understatement to say that Celtic are struggling at the minute. Both on and off the park, things seem a little bit of a shambles. And after watching our rivals win the first trophy of the season earlier this afternoon, things are a little bit negative at Celtic at the minute. And that needs to change. And it needs to change fast, because we are heading and spiralling into a little bit of a crisis here. There's still time to turn it round, but how much patience is left with Celtic fans? That is the big question. We're going to recap yesterday. We're going to talk about moving forward. A huge couple of months coming up for Celtic. Brendan Rodgers needs to turn this boat, and he has to turn it fast. That felt weird. Should have been turn the ship, not the boat. Either way, it has to turn. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. It would be much appreciated as we try and head towards 50,000 subscribers. It's a very tense atmosphere at the minute out there in the Celtic social media world, YouTube, Twitter, all the rest of it. Say one thing that people don't agree with, you could be hung for it. So today I'm going to try and talk level-headed now that the dust has settled from yesterday's loss to Hearts, which is still very difficult. A lot of raw emotions out there for not just obviously myself, but for every Celtic fan, where we're kind of hurting after yesterday's 2-0 loss. And I imagine more of you are feeling the pain and feeling hurt with Rangers winning the League Cup. The thing is, we can't let that be the focus at the minute. Celtic need to go and focus on improving on what we're doing. And that's got to be the priority over the next few weeks. We take on Rangers in a couple of weeks' time. Momentum is high in the Rangers camp at the minute. Momentum doesn't really exist within the Celtic camp at the minute. So we're going to talk today about all the problems, how we fix that and what needs to be addressed. But boy, it isn't easy. So bear with me. Yesterday was a complete disaster in so many ways for Celtic. The performance was far from what is expected at this level. The result, of course, now opens a door for Rangers to potentially go top of the table, depending how results go. You know, if they come to Celtic Park and beat us, they could go 4 points clear at the top of the table. And ultimately, a little bit of toxicity has entered the Celtic support. And we've seen that voiced online, on the Clyde One Super Scoreboard, and even in the stands yesterday, a little bit of toxicity directed towards certain elements, especially the board here at Celtic. And you know what, you can't blame anyone for it. You know, I've seen a lot of, and this is one of the main talking points I wanted to talk about today in this video. A lot of the outside of Celtic, you know, opposition supporters, fans of other teams, media, etc., seems to be this narrative being created right now that Celtic fans can't handle the defeats. You know, that a lot of this hypothetical scenario is being painted. You know, oh, imagine they were Rangers fans and went through what we went through and yada yada. Oh, imagine they supported the Raith Rovers. Oh, they wouldn't be able to handle it. They can't handle 2 losses in a row. It's not so much the losses right now that is really hurting Celtic fans. It's more the manner of how things are going, both on and off the park. There is problems that people who don't support Celtic will probably not be able to understand, because we realise here at Celtic there is a ambition and there is a possibility for us to do much bigger and much better things. But year after year we're constantly kind of held back and refrain from reaching that potential and reaching that place that we could be, because of the people who run the club and because of the limitations that are put in front of us. It's not easy being in Scottish football. I'm not saying that if Celtic had different owners, they'd be out challenging for European silverware and winning 38 games out of 38 games. I like a challenge. You know, I don't mind when Celtic lose a game. It hurts, and obviously you want your team to win every game. I'm not somebody to throw the toys at the pram as soon as a loss happens. You know, Kilmarnock last week, it was what it was. But it is now the manner of how it's all happening. It seems to be falling apart. The squad is looking in an abysmal state right now, and you know, everybody at the club is taking you know, some flack for that. The manager, the board, the players. There's a place now mentally where Celtic fans are, where we don't really see where the club's going and we all seem a little bit lost. So, all these people going, oh, Celtic fans can't handle their loss. It's not just about losing the game. If you lose a game 1-0 and you've played really well and you've lost to a jammy goal or a penalty or whatever, you can kind of move on from it. You can kind of accept it. But that's 2 weeks in a row now where Celtic have performed in a pathetic manner and they haven't played good enough. And that's why Celtic fans aren't happy. Because you've got to be honest, you've got to be brutally honest when your team's not playing to the standard you expect of them. And the thing is, for all these comments that I keep seeing from Rangers fans and everybody else saying, oh, you couldn't handle being in our shoes, you would love to see you reacting to what we've went through. Okay, fair enough. You'd love to see me react to that. But do you know why Celtic fans don't like losing and we don't get ourselves into these situations? Because our expectations and our standards are really, really high, as they should be. Celtic fans don't expect the bare minimum of Celtic Football Club. Celtic fans want more. And that's why we've been so successful for the past 20 years domestically. Sadly, that has been our limit. That has been our ceiling. We've not expanded upon that domestic success, but there's a reason that Celtic won a treble and then a double treble and then a treble and then a quadruple treble, because fans and everybody at the club should realise that the expectation for Celtic Football Club is to win at all costs and win everything. That should always be the ambition. If you're happy with watching your side lose title after title and cup after cup or whatever, that's fine, but that isn't how Celtic fans roll. And I don't think people can understand that mindset. People are struggling to understand the mindset of Celtic fans and how they would adapt to the mindset of another Scottish team. I don't think people can understand, without being a Celtic fan, what it's like to expect that of your club and why we expect that of our club. Because Celtic should be, and they are, but should be the best. Always. And that is the bare minimum for Celtic supporters. Brendan Rodgers did comment after the game yesterday, and after being Celtic fans demanded him to take some responsibility for yesterday's defeat rather than using the same sort of recruitment excuses or squad depth excuses. Brendan Rodgers did comment, and I wouldn't say he's went all out and take responsibility like some people wanted him to, but this was his comments. He said, we lacked any desire in our defending, we lacked that drive when we had the ball and that intensity. I felt as if we could have played all night and not scored. Ultimately, we've got done at a corner, we've been done naively blocked, and then from a free kick, where we were so passive in the build-up to the free kick. I'm surprised at home we produced that level of performance, but not so when I've seen the St Johnstone first half and then Kilmarnock. It disappoints me greatly because we've not shown the necessary determination, the passive nature of it, and without the ball, it was a concern. So that was his main comments. He then went on to say that he doesn't think the wheels have fallen off yet, which is slightly scary because you don't even want to think about the wheels falling off. And I think for a lot of people, the reaction to yesterday is that the wheels are coming off, and a lot of people are already kind of demanding the manager to go, never mind anything else. I'll come on to that in a minute. But it is worrying when you hear the manager come out and say there is a lack of desire and there is a lack of drive, and he's not happy with it. Because it's down to him ultimately to get that team motivated and get them set up to play a brand of football or a standard of football that's good enough to win games at Celtic Park. And ultimately, there's been 2 or 3 occasions this season at Celtic Park we haven't been able to do that. And that is obviously a little bit concerning because he has to change that. And this is where Brendan Rodgers has to have a look at things himself. Yeah, I am very understanding of the state that Celtic are in just now with the squad. It ain't good enough. It's not. But Brendan Rodgers at the end of the day has to work with the tools he's given, and he has to do better with the tools he's given, because realistically, no matter how many dross players there are in this squad, a lot of them would still walk into the Hearts squad or the St Johnstone squad or the Kelly squad. A lot of the players here would walk straight into any, besides Rangers, Premiership starting 11 probably. So Brendan Rodgers has to do better with those tools. So he's got to have a look at himself, and he's got to sort things out. The football we're playing isn't good enough. It's not entertaining for us at the minute. It has dried up and teams have sussed us out. So it's up to him as a manager to change and adapt that, because we've also got a number of players at the club at the moment in time who sadly have really stagnated. Their progression as a player, it's not gone forward. Whereas, the end of last season we had players who were on an upward trajectory. I don't think there's many players who you could say this season are on an upward trajectory. Guys like Alistair Johnson, they have looked a shadow of what they were. He hasn't been good enough. Callum McGregor, a shadow of who he was. Kyogo, nowhere near the level that he was last season. There are too many players that aren't progressing and bringing anything to this side at a minute, and they're dipping their performance levels are really concerning. That comes down to both the manager and the players as well. They've got to realise they've got to do better, but everybody just seems a little bit lost. So, I don't think it's as simple as Rodgers, just playing every single one of these players to their strengths and completely disregard the system. But there certainly is a halfway point there where the manager has to look at what the strengths are of players, try and adapt his style a little bit without completely disregarding what he's trying to do as a manager. But as I said, he's got to sit down, he's got to sort that. The one thing I will say is, and I know a lot of people aren't feeling this at the minute, and I know this is the point of what I'm going to say in this video that will probably get critiqued the most in the comments section. I think that any cry for Brendan Rodgers to be sacked is it's too far, right? In my humble opinion, it is way too far. Listen, we are looking at a manager here who, hasn't given us what we've expected 4 or 5 months into the season, but he's certainly a good enough manager to turn that around. I still have faith he'll turn that around. Now, I know a lot of people are calling up the stations yesterday and saying that they have no faith whatsoever, but I think that it would be far too premature to suggest that it's never going to work for Brendan Rodgers here. We're in the middle of a rough spell. Rough spells happen. And when the time comes, and we know when the time comes, we've seen it in the COVID season with Lenny, there was no hope, there was no way back. When that point comes, it will be extremely evident. Do I think that that's now? No. But he has invited a whole lot of unnecessary pressure on himself to now appease a large amount of Celtic fans. I think there's still a lot of people going off, the people that I follow on social media and the stuff that I see on Twitter. There are still a lot of people like-minded to myself. Still a lot of people who believe that Brendan Rodgers is good enough and will turn this round. And, is in quite an unfortunate position with the squad and such. It's not an excuse, but a lot of people still faith in the manager, which is good. I'd like to see that as well. But he's invited a lot of unnecessary pressure on himself. We had an 8-point lead at the top of the table. We've squandered that. This derby is now going to be incredibly interesting in the sense of what the aftermath of it will be. If we don't win that derby, then that's the point where I think that you'll see perhaps a large majority of Celtic fans firmly on the bandwagon of getting Brendan Rodgers out. And that was pressure he didn't need to invite on himself. Realistically, the season's got a long way to go. Nothing's over yet. And there is time to turn this round. January is a huge part of that. But this derby could be make or break for Brendan Rodgers. One thing you've got to accept, no matter what your stance is on him, no matter what your position is on him, he ain't going to get sacked. That's just simply not going to happen. He's the highest paid manager in the history of the club. He's on a 3-year contract. The board love him. And he is, at the end of the day, an extremely good candidate for the Celtic job. They aren't going to get rid of him. That's not my opinion coming out of this. It's just they aren't going to do it. Unless we lost game after game from now until maybe February or March time, he ain't going to get sacked. But fans will call for it if things don't improve. So Brendan Rodgers has to have a look at that. I've got faith he can do it. He just needs to put that into action. As I just mentioned, January is a huge part of all of this. I have said this time and time again, and I will stand by it. I don't think January is going to solve all the problems. So don't get your expectations too high for it, because I certainly don't have mine too high for it. The guys that we are currently getting linked with certainly do, interest me, and it makes me happy to see us linked with players. But I'm not going to sit here and say that the guys that we are being linked with are the saviours of Celtic Football Club and are suddenly going to make everything okay. I think there's a long way to go. I think that summer is where you're going to see the ball properly moving in terms of Brendan Rodgers getting the players he wants and the squad that's good enough to, change games and have a bench that's actually good enough, I think that's going to take longer than just the January transfer window. But January is huge. Now, earlier in the week, it was reported in Stephen McGowan anyway. Stephen McGowan reported that Celtic are going to be pretty ruthless in this window. It was a Scottish Daily Mail, Stephen McGowan. Apparently Celtic already looking to get rid of Gustav Lagerbielke, which is a bonkers story in its own, considering he only signed 6 months ago. But this is the problem. This is the kind of summary of what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic that makes Celtic fans so irritated and so annoyed. The only reason it seems that we've signed him now is because an agent recommended him to Mark Lawwell. That seems to be the only reason we've signed him. Now, if that is the basis for Celtic scouting, recruiting and signing players, That is an absolute mess. It's a travesty that that's going on at our club. This is a guy, Mark Lawwell, who's been given the job of head of recruitment, not head of accepting recommendations. Should be doing our own work, and that seems to be the only reason he's coming in now, and apparently now we want rid of him. Why did we sign him in the first place? £3 million we spent on the boy as well. So, you know, we need a revamp everywhere in this club. If it was up to me, if I was in charge, I would be doing a full sweep. It wouldn't be the manager first on my list. It would be the recruitment team who would be getting a complete overhaul, because the recruitment's not been good enough. It's not been good enough for a couple of years now, and it transcends Brendan Rodgers. The last good window we had was now coming up 2 years ago. That was the last time we properly improved this team. 2 years. To not make an improvement in a summer window, a January window, and then a following summer window, to not make one improvement to the squad is an absolute shambles. And instead we've let players like Moy, Jota, Carl Starfelt, Georgie Shakamakis go without bringing in the quality replacements instead for them. And that, for me, I'm sorry, I don't care if you don't agree with me here on this one, that's not down to Brendan Rodgers, that's down to the guys working behind the scenes, because it was still happening when Ange Postecoglou was here. So January does need to be ruthless. We need to cut dead wood. We need to make signings. I just hope that we make quality signings. I hope Brendan Rodgers is actually doing his work and alongside it. I don't want any of this yet. Okay, tick off on that signing. I want him to be doing work. I want him to be identifying targets. I want him to overall put his stamp on this team to give us what we should expect rather than the dross we've been watching in the last few weeks. I could go on all day about some of the problems right now at the club, but I'm going to try my best to keep the video as watchable as possible. I don't want to be talking straight direct to you for fucking 40 minutes. So there will be a podcast out this week, and we will talk about things in a little bit more depth, and we'll probably expand on it more in tomorrow's video depending on what the news is. But ultimately, you know, Chris Sutton dubbed Celtic season as bang average, and it would be hard to argue that. We have now obviously watched as Rangers win the League Cup, handed them a lot of momentum in this league title race as well. We have been bang average, and that's what needs to change. And Brendan Rodgers has to get that through to not only his squad but himself to try and turn this around. And I have the utmost confidence that we will turn it around. But the longer this goes on, the harder it will get, the more tedious it will become, and the more toxic it will become. So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be sorted ASAP. It can't go on much longer. Right then, that does it for me this evening. Thank you for tuning into this late Sunday one. I was waiting until after the cup final was done to come on and record, despite knowing that the result was going to be Rangers winning anyway. I just thought, okay, we'll let everybody get that watched and out the road, and I'll come on and cheer us up, I've hardly done that. Right, if you've enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.